I saw out of the corner of my eye this gigantic dog bounding down the driveway toward the highway where I was riding my bike, and it was the first time I ever heard the neighbor call his dog. And I'm pretty sure it was calling the dog back instead of calling the dog onto me, but the dog's name was Hitler.
Oh, jeez. 999.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, Happy New Year, America, and welcome to the 2019 edition of On Gravel, number one for the year. Happy New Year, fellas.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, sir.
I am a little concerned that our producer didn't get our last episode of 2018 out in time, so this might actually be the second episode of 2019.
You know, I thought about that, but I hope for the best.
Your producer sent me the final version today. It may go yet today. Today's New Year's Eve. This said producer was at a Colorado Avalanche hockey game over the weekend, so hard to not excuse a guy when he goes and watches a Blackhawks Avalanche overtime hockey game.
Did I ever tell you guys about the time I got to drink out of the Stanley Cup that was won by the Colorado Avalanche? True story.
I don't know that I've ever heard this story.
So, in 2002, the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. And one of the members of the team was a guy named Dan Heinold, who went to high school in Elk River, where I'm from. Was good friends with my brother. My brother and he played for years and years and years. And when he brought the Stanley Cup back to Minnesota, they had a big town celebration, and he had it at the bar that night. And I got to the bar, and I went up and I congratulated him on winning the Stanley Cup, and he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Grain Belt Premium." And they poured the premium, Grain Belt Premium beer into the Stanley Cup, and I tipped it over, and I drank out of it, spilled half of it on me, but I got to drink beer out of the Stanley Cup.
Jeez.
I can't believe you've held this long from us.
Well, I didn't know you guys were interested in hockey.
Oh, I'm not. But that transcends interest in hockey.
Drinking out of the Stanley Cup. I got to tell you, it's pretty cool because you just go through and read the names from 1956, and the Rocket Richard and old names like that. It was pretty cool. But the fact that kid I grew up with has got his name on the Stanley Cup is pretty awesome too. And he let me drink beer out of it. So that's I did nothing to earn the cup on my own. I was on the last bad Elk River hockey team, and I was pretty poor. I was one of the big reasons that we were a bad hockey team. But I'm so proud that they've turned it around since I've left and produced NHL stars.
So, wait, if you are on a team that wins the Stanley Cup, your name gets etched on the cup? Everybody's does?
Yeah, every player and every coach gets their name on the cup. That's why the cup keeps getting bigger and bigger, because they keep adding layers below it. It started out as a punch bowl.
All right.
And so they keep adding layers.
So if a Stanley Cup was awarded in 2018 to outdoors people, who are you putting on the cup?
Wasn't 2018 the year of Steve Rinella? I mean,
I think you're right.
He's everywhere. He's on Netflix. He's everywhere.
So he gets the cup?
I don't know. Who do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's not really a team sport. I guess I'd feel a little funny getting the cup because it maybe indicates that I sold out, or I became I took this fairly, kind of private moment and exploited it for my own gain.
Well, what if, there's individual trophies in hockey as well. There's the Conn Smythe and the Norris Trophy, and I don't know what any of those are awarded for. I just remember my 1980s Topps hockey cards had those awards on them, but maybe we create our own individual awards for hunting. So, like the greatest coyote kill during a pheasant hunt would go to Eric Dinger.
Well, thank you. Do I
get to give what's that cup called?
Do I give a speech?
Well, we got to come up with the name for the award first. The Lady Latrans.
The what?
I was going for the Yoti Bowl, but I like that better.
The Yodi Bowl is what Alabama's playing in. I think we're devolving already.
We are. Hey, I have a question about dogs. My red dog, on occasion, and this happens to be exactly that occasion, thinks that she needs to crawl up onto my lap. Do you guys have full-grown lap dogs?
Yes.
I have a full-grown dog who would love to be a lap dog, but she also has this she's a strange creature. She's got kind of an atrophied sense of both morals and ethics. I don't really know the difference, but she's got problems with both of them. So she wants to join me in my lap, but she knows she shouldn't, and that tension defines her. She looks longingly and then hates herself for thinking those thoughts.
Like 5 married guys standing outside of the strip club?
So this is a slight divulgement, or I guess detour. It has nothing to do with strippers, but you guys might recall I drove to South Dakota for a pheasant hunt last month. I took Nellie with me, and she has trouble even riding shotgun a little bit. She loves the idea of it, but she's embarrassed by it. So she'll look out the window, and then she'll like slowly turn her head to the left to look at me. And the minute we make eye contact, she looks at the floor again because she knows like she's not really supposed to do it. It makes for a fun drive across North Dakota. But then we got to the hotel in Aberdeen. Very, very dog-friendly place, as you might imagine, for the heart of pheasant season in Aberdeen. So I invited her into the hotel room, and I didn't bring her bed in. Instead, there were 2 queen-size beds, and I invited her up in my bed with me. Well, she didn't do it. She didn't do it for the longest time. Finally, I cajoled her, and she got her front paws up on the bed. I was a little bit afraid that she was going to take a leak out of embarrassment. She didn't, thankfully. She got up in the bed, and the tension lasted for maybe, I'm not talking sexual tension here, the ethical, moral tension lasted for about 15 seconds, and then she spread out so, like, well, I was going to say effusively, that she almost kicked me off the bed, and she spent the whole night in 90% of the bed, and I had 10%.
Every Labrador I've ever had has been a bed hog. So I know the struggle, and it's real.
The next night I was going to invite her back. She would not do it, so I brought her bed in, and she was happier on the floor. I just think she kind of knows her place, even though she longs to be out of it. Anyway.
So you guys probably have these stories, but I have a fairly hard couple of bowls at the office. And I went to give my dog water today, and somehow she has chewed her extremely hard plastic bowl into 8,700 pieces. Also a lab thing, just, how am I supposed to give the dog water if her water bowl is chewed into 1,000 pieces? Is that a thing?
Well, you need to catch her when she's doing it and give her a correction. But, yeah, Labradors like to take big things and chew them down into little things. And if you're lucky, they don't swallow them. If you're unlucky, then they eat all these things that they chew from big pieces into little pieces.
So what's the craziest thing your dog's ever chewed up?
My dog, I've got a whole long list from my last dog. Soka, my young dog, hasn't really done too much crazy yet, but Delta once ate an entire bar of Irish Spring soap and pooped out the little green crystals that are in there. And then she also...
leprechaun leavings?
Yes, the leprechaun droppings. And then she also once ate an entire 1-pound bag of Ghirardelli chocolates, including the foil wrappers. And so for a week, she was pooping out foil wrapper poop. But that incident taught me 2 things. 1, this whole thing, chocolate's poisonous to dogs, maybe a little overblown. And 2, my dog had the intestines of titanium. She could eat anything. And she did.
Well, Miss Nellie, I think I may have reported to you previously, one of my beginning hunters was staying with us and shot his very first mule deer, and we were butchering it together in our mudroom, and we left all of the constituent parts out in the mudroom while we went and had dinner. We came back to finish the wrapping, and he's like, I guess I shot a one backstrapped deer, probably the only one in existence. I knew that didn't make sense. It looked like a pretty complete deer to me. We make eye contact with Nellie, who will not look us in the eye. And I realized in the course of maybe a half an hour, she had eaten an entire backstrap from a mule deer.
Oh my God.
Yeah. This was Nick, he somehow has forgiven her. I mean, he tells me he has. I don't know if he really has or not. I mean, this is the dude's very first deer. Maybe the most prime cut from his very first deer has been rendered into dog food. That hurt a little bit.
Well, Nick
Nellie's
did
got this
live with
sock
you for
fetish.
an entire month, so that's a small price to pay for rent.
Yeah, good point. Nellie has this sock fetish, and I'm a little bit worried. There's no evidence she's ever eaten one. She just likes picking up socks and bringing it to me in the morning. But I also noticed that I've got a lot of orphan socks now. I've looked for evidence that maybe she's swallowed them and rendered them into yarn, butt yarn, I'm going to call it. But I haven't seen it.
So that's a great segue to my neighbor's dog. They have a 120-pound just beast of a yellow lab, and they were super worried about him because he hadn't eaten in like 3 days. And finally one day he starts coughing and choking in the kitchen. This is just a couple days ago, and he puked out 2 white tube socks. So they were never rendered yarn.
Well, better that he poops them out than they obstruct a bowel.
Speaking of obstructing bowels, weren't we going to talk about politics?
Yeah, we were. I just can't get up for it. I'm happy to talk about it, but we're in the second full week of our federal government shutdown. I know it's affecting people's incomes, livelihoods, careers. I mean, it's not a trivial thing. On the other hand, most of what I've seen so far has been all my federal employees out hunting quite a bit.
Yeah, it's not. I haven't felt the impact, and the thing is, we've seen shutdowns before, and we know that everybody's going to be made whole. They're going to get paid for the work that they didn't do while they weren't doing it. So it's hard for people living paycheck to paycheck to get through to the next paycheck. But yeah, I'm not. What I appreciate about this administration is that they haven't tried to make the shutdown feel worse than it could on the general public. They haven't barred access to federal wildlife areas or shut down national forests, where we've seen things like that happen with politics in shutdowns before. But no, my big complaint is that at the end of the last Congress, we had an opportunity to pass a whole slew of sportsman-friendly bills that had bipartisan support, and it essentially got killed by one senator from Utah, Mike Lee, who wanted to change the Antiquities Act because he didn't like how President Obama and other presidents have used the Antiquities Act to create monuments and things, even though there was widespread support for a whole bunch of really good, important pieces of legislation. And it shouldn't have surprised me. It really shouldn't. One, Mike Lee's done this before, but the bigger thing was the sportsman's package always fails at the end, even when it has huge bipartisan support, which makes me think that it really doesn't have bipartisan support. I think that we're just kind of a toy for both sides of the aisle on some of these issues. I'm just really frustrated. We had some legislation in there to help encourage shooting range development and a whole bunch of other things. The Land and Water Conservation Fund is still expired. Just a whole bunch of pieces of legislation that would have been nice to have but got killed at the end again.
You can't say Land and Water Conservation Fund without explaining to our listener what that is.
Well, dear listener, the Land and Water Conservation Fund it's been around since the 60s, and what it is it's a chunk of money dedicated from offshore oil and gas leases. So offshore oil rigs, when they bring up the oil, they have to pay a royalty. Well, part of that royalty goes to the Land and Water Conservation Fund in an account, and it's supposed to be allocated by Congress. and it's eligible to be used in all 50 states and the territories for uh, access and recreation, and it's really popular in the West because it's one of the main tools that is used to acquire fishing access on streams and land access to federal lands and places. In the East, we tend to pay for those things out of our hunting license fees a little bit more. But in the West, Land and Water Conservation Fund is a big chunk of that. It expired this year. There was a bipartisan agreement on refunding it. Republican Chairman Bishop and in the House put together a coalition. They passed it in the House. It was there ready in the Senate, but we just couldn't get it across the finish line again for lots of different reasons. But so that's basically it. It's part of our system of access, and it's one of those funds where it's not coming directly out of the pockets of sportsmen or the regular taxpayers. It comes from oil and gas leases. The thought behind it being, since these are extractive industries, that if they help contribute to future conservation, that they can offset some of the negatives from extracting oil from offshore oil beds. So that's the thought. But it's currently expired. I don't know when it's going to get renewed. It seems like the votes are there in the last Congress and this one, but we'll see if it happens.
So I want to pile on something you said there, Bronson. So I think you're exactly right. I think these things, the sportsman's package, is always presented as mom and apple pie bipartisan success, but yet it always gets gummed up at the last minute. So I have two questions. One, does it get gummed up and fail to pass because of horse trading and kind of the dirty mechanics of politics? Is the first question. And the second one is, I genuinely want to know how the sportsmen and women of America can help push it over the finish line. And I think I'm frustrated by trying to tell the story over and over. It feels like crying wolf. Back in when I worked for Outdoor Life, we got asked by a number of conservation groups every time the Sportsman Act kind of looked like it was going to, come to fruition and be passed, to, really rally the troops and get readers behind, constituent politics. Get in touch with your congressman or woman and encourage them to vote for it. So every time we would do it and every time it would fail, it's hard to go back to the well time and time again with that and get people motivated to get involved in the political process when it just feels like, their voice doesn't, in the end, have much meaning. So I guess those are two separate questions, but how can we get sportsmen and women of America to get this pushed over the finish line once and for all?
So you want me to offer a solution for a problem that no one has been able to overcome for the last 6 years? That's how smart you think I am.
I'm giving you an opportunity to just rant, and I can't believe that you would look that gift horse in the mouth.
Well, one of my resolutions for this year is to rant less, not to completely give it up, because let's face it, it's a safety valve that if I don't let off some of that steam, I may blow up. But I honestly think that the issue with the sportsman's package of legislation is that a lot of the really controversial dumb stuff, like the polar bear, being able to re-import polar bears, that's a real tiny issue that only affects about 150 people who shot polar bears and didn't get them imported into the U.S. before the Endangered Species Act made importing polar bear trophies illegal. That's a pretty small issue. That's kind of gone away. I think people have given up on that issue. They kept trying to stick that in. So the stuff that's left, you got Land and Water Conservation Fund, you got shooting range protection, you've got some Pittman-Robertson updating and changes that people want. The constituency for most of these things isn't even the overall hunting community, but it's pretty much the hunting community. And Democrats have embraced some of them, and Republicans have embraced some of them. but it's like neither side really cares enough about those issues or that constituency that they're willing to actually trade for it. So it becomes, this is the chip that, everyone wants to give up and no one wants to claim, if that makes sense. Because it's just not tripping the trigger for enough people. So honestly, I think at this point, the shooting sports industry is probably gonna. We've already started to do it. Where our top priorities is we're going to focus on those, and we're not going to worry about the greater coalition as much, because the greater coalition doesn't seem to be getting things passed. So those things that are very specific to our industry, I think we're probably going to focus on and try to work on. But in this current Congress, I don't think that the House of Representatives and the leadership we have now cares one whit for what the shooting sports industry wants. So that's going to make it hard for the next 2 years, and maybe longer. So I don't have a solution.
It seems like that strategy is designed to fail, because the coalition, as you've said in the past, we've got pro-gun Democrats and pro-wilderness Republicans that were able to come together with some sort of a effective voting bloc, or at least on paper. Maybe it didn't happen in reality. It just seems like to fracture that coalition, especially if you're a shooting sport enthusiast, may not be the best strategy in this coming Congress.
Yeah, but
instead, it makes more sense to keep the coalition together. But
no, the coalition's good and important. It's just that the coalition was together for a long time, and it didn't seem to matter. Here's the issue that we're dealing with now. You need to show me some pro-gun Democrats, and you need to show me some pro-wilderness Republicans, because I don't think they exist anymore. Those are the people who lost elections this last time. I look here at my home state here in Minnesota. We had a congressman that represents part of our factory. Our factory is big enough that it's in 2 congressional districts, the Federal Premium Ammunition Factory in Anoka, Minnesota. And Eric Paulson represented the southern half of our factory, and he was a strong supporter of the Boundary Waters Canoe area, a Republican, protecting it from mining and a whole bunch of other issues that people care about a lot. He got beat. And then I look across the border in North Dakota. Heidi Heitkamp was one of the strongest pro-gun Democrats that we had in the U.S. Congress, in the Senate, and she got crushed. Now, she was replaced by someone even more pro-gun, but on all those other issues where she was probably the more moderate and better voice for sportsmen, okay, she's gone. And in Minnesota, Eric Paulson's gone, and I can point to Congress people all over the country where folks in the middle that were willing to come across the aisle on issues like this lost. They're gone. We got more polarized in this election than anything. The Republicans got more hard right, and the Democrats got more hard left. And those of us that have issues that live somewhere in between there probably are going to have a harder time for the next 2 years. Not just sportsmen, but a lot of other people.
Wait, so I'm still waiting on the solution rant.
I don't have a solution. I don't have a solution.
And that's why it's fun talking politics.
Yep.
Or not.
So I think maybe a New Year's resolution is we don't talk about politics. No, forget that. That's stupid.
It's meaningful, and I think this is the delta is it is meaningful. Look at the Land and Water Conservation Fund permanent authorization and funding. I am a Westerner. It does matter. It's easy to just sort of give up and say, this coalition isn't working. Politics is a game of polls, but that's almost a recipe for not getting things done, and just acknowledging that we're just going to give up and kind of sit on our thumbs for a while. And I'm frustrated. I think I'm a political animal, but I really don't enjoy getting involved in politics anymore. It just feels like a very unsatisfying game.
Did you just describe yourself as a political animal?
I might have.
Okay. Make a mark on that, Marty. It's 26:39 on my timer. I don't know what it actually is on the podcast, but let's pull that because I want to use that again in the future.
Oh, boys. All right, you've mentioned a few times resolutions. We may be well into the new year by the time that this hits the asphalt or gravel. But I love the idea of resolutions. It's a little bit of a time marker, at least in my family. I think I told you guys a little bit about how we do resolutions. We actually write them down and revisit them before we make the next year's resolution. I think one of the resolutions that's appeared on the little chit from year to year has been to do more push-ups. I used to be able to do 78 push-ups at a toss of a hat. Anybody asked me to do push-ups, I would do them. I struggled with 80, so that was 78 I could do pretty effortlessly. I haven't done a push-up in some time. I think I can still knock out 50 at a turn, but I want to do more. That was kind of a nice thing to be able to just do.
Okay, Andrew, I love orange sherbet, but where are you finding push-ups in that kind of quantity? At our Costco, I can only get them 12 at a time.
It helps to be able to. It helps to have 35 pounds of upper body mass in order to do more push-ups too.
It's true. That's a distance runner's, attribute.
My head alone would cause less push-ups in your life. I got a 40-pound dome.
Yeah, but here's something I've noticed, and this is both, I think, an argument for and an argument against more push-ups, is over Christmas we brought a ping pong table that I bought for our family several years ago out of retirement. We set it back up in the family room of our new house, and we have been playing some monster games of ping pong. I might have a little bursitis in my right shoulder, and I don't know if it's because of age or ping pong or both, but that might frustrate my push-up resolution.
I think archery has something to do with that too. I think right shoulder injuries with archers. Oh wait, you're a lefty.
Yeah, and I've got left shoulder issues, so keep talking.
Okay,
let's just have a whole episode on McKean's issues.
So what's your resolution, Dinger?
Well, I'm not one to make a bunch of resolutions, but at the risk of being super cliche, I have done myself no favors this holiday season with the food. So I probably will lose a few pounds. I refuse to call that a resolution simply because it's so cliche. So mine this year, maybe it's a resolution, maybe it's just something I need to get on the calendar, but a lot of people I know, and Andrew, you've inspired this to a degree, take their kids on one-on-one trips. And so this year, I'm going to take each of my 3 kids. We've got one planned with my oldest, but I'm going to take the little 2 on a father-daughter and then a father-son little trip. So there's mine. I'm going to take the little people for a jaunt somewhere fun for them. So I think Reagan's super into horses, so I'll probably find something horse-related for her, and my son loves Legos more than life itself, so I'll probably take him to Kansas City to the big Lego land there. So how about you, Bronson?
I think I'm going to try to renew my resolution from last year, and I'm going to try again this year to give up outrage. Something that
Bullshit.
which might not make for such a fiery podcaster, if I'm not outraged, but that's truly what I'm working on. I don't know if I told you guys, but this year I read a book by Jonah Goldberg called Suicide of the West, and the real theme of the book was that America is losing gratitude for what really is so great about America and what has enabled us to succeed. And it's classic liberal, freedom and appreciation for a form of government that we have that no one else really in the world has. And related to that gratitude is giving up outrage, because I think that's one of society's ills right now. Is Twitter is just an outrage machine, and cable cable news and cable television is just an outrage machine, and so I'm jettisoning Fox News and MSNBC and CNN and all of that, and I'm just choosing not to be outraged every time Nancy Pelosi does something to try to take away my Second Amendment rights. I'm just gonna buckle down and fight for my freedoms, but not be outraged.
Well, at the risk of alienating my fellow podcasters, we're going to have a new podcast resolution for 2019, and that is going to be to get Bronson to kick his 2019 resolution on air. Trigger.
I'm in.
Trigger alert. It's
right.
coming.
That's great because that makes just for more entertaining stuff. And then when you guys remind me that what my resolution was, then I'll feel bad about that, and then I'll probably get angrier. So
if I bring up the Vikings today, is that something you want to talk about?
Much like I gave up, I'm working on giving up outrage for next year. After last year's debacle in the playoffs, I really just didn't care all that much about the Vikings this year. I bet I watched on television maybe a total of 14 quarters. So I don't think there's any games that I watched beginning to end.
What if McKean and I? Wait, we don't care about the Vikings anymore. It didn't get the desired effect. What if we ask you about your elk hunt again, and remind you that you're the only elk hunter in America that didn't have to get into shape before he left on his elk hunt?
Well, I was not in bad shape.
Elk hunting's easy.
Elk hunting's easy as long as you have somebody ferry you around like a princess.
You kept man.
The resolution that I would like to propose is that we have an on-gravel bird hunt that includes the Rainbow Coalition of Labradors.
I love that idea. Could we also have maybe a push-off as part of that? That would keep me on track.
Okay, well, we're going to need Yeti to sponsor us because to hold all of the push-ups that you eat is going to require a lot of coolers.
Just refusing to acknowledge there's another version. Maybe you should have the weight loss resolution like me, Bronson.
Well, clearly I've acknowledged my overweightness, and so and also like you, I don't think a resolution is kind of cliche, and I try to not be cliched. Remember, I don't use Leopold quotes because I don't want to be a cliche. Only
every time you're ever given a microphone.
No, I used the Leopold quote in Kansas, and it was to a group of farmers who didn't know who Aldo Leopold was.
Oh,
so
yeah, because they're
that's
farmers,
not a cliche.
so they don't read. They're farmers, so they don't read. You're right.
They don't read Sand County Almanac.
This is going to be so easy to trigger you.
Was there an off-air production meeting before this podcast started where you guys said, "Hey, let's gang up on Bronson to see if we can get him going"?
No, we had it in the background while you were talking.
Okay.
It's going to be so fun.
I'm shutting my microphone off now.
You notice that McKean said push-ups, right? He used that in the plural sense, so you're going to have to practice a little bit. Get past one.
Well, we to come back to maybe a little more collegiality, we do have to figure out where we're going to meet to bird hunt, and I think this is maybe one where we invite our listener to suggest places.
Oh yeah.
Does it matter what kind of bird?
Is it going to be pheasants? Is it going to be grouse? Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Do we want to do something early season? Maybe it's, our dogs they're labs, so they don't do super well in the heat. But do we do something late season? Is it pheasants? Is it grouse? What do we do?
Is there a bird that neither of you have shot? A game bird?
Sounds like we're going to Russia.
Russian black cock. And Mr. Listener, I did just say Russian black cock, and that is not an E rating. That is an actual bird. Google it carefully. Careful.
Well, we're not going to get a chance to shoot lesser prairie chickens, I'm guessing.
I don't know anywhere where you can. So
Bronson and I were in the National Grasslands of South Dakota after greater prairie chickens, and the only one I shot was a sharp-tail prairie chicken hybrid. So I'm still kind of looking for that pure greater prairie chicken.
oh,
All right, I'm in.
I've got a couple of spots marked on my GPS that had a lot of prairie chickens this year.
Anyway, that could be
That's
kind
the
of a
one.
good destination.
That's the one. A native species with our native of Canada dogs. It's just poetic.
A.
Eh? Isn't a Labrador from Labrador? Wasn't it? It's actually
England.
Is it? Oh yeah, that makes sense. How'd they get the name Labrador if they're from England?
Google it.
All right, I think to tie a couple of themes together here, I want to hear your resolution for your dog.
Good one.
Well, I think the thing that I am working on right now with Soka is getting her to believe me when I give her hand signals. So I think my resolution
Yeah.
is for when I get her to sit, turn, and look at me. When I point right, she actually goes right instead of sniffing around left to make sure that's not really where it is before she goes right. So I think getting her to respond to my hand signals every time with some faith is my resolution.
I'm gonna work on
I have
keeping.
a
I'm gonna work on keeping Scout close without yelling at her. I started last weekend. We walked together alone, and I started doing a little. Oh, she looked at me. She's like, "Which way should I go?" I'm gonna do a little whistle, a quiet whistle that she'll pick up that most people won't. I don't enjoy when people yell at their dogs a lot, and so I'm gonna try and get to where I don't have to yell at her at all to control her. At least keep her close, not necessarily control her. How about you?
It's actually a variation on both of those themes. I call Old Nellie Threefer because it takes the third command before she takes me seriously. I've worked a little bit on voice inflection, and if I am just a badass commandant with the first one, she will obey it. But that also becomes a little bit hard to hear after a while. It's so she's pretty willful dog where she not only, unlike Soka, won't believe the first or second time I say something. It's the third time that she's like, okay, he's serious. I'd like to shortstop that and make sure that she's listening that first time and obeying that first time. So, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, if you guys just heard that crash, that was actually my dog pulling my headset and everything else off of my head. So she knew I was talking about her.
Soka's ready to be done.
So, all right, I'm recalibrated now, but so question for you guys, because when I use my dog training voice when I'm giving a command, my wife says I sound angry, and my response to her is, well, if I were using that voice towards you, I would be, but it's just my command voice to my dog. Do you guys ever have the problem where the voice you need to use to make sure your dog knows that you're serious and giving a command ends up being socially unacceptable to other people?
So I think that's actually exactly what I'm getting at. Is I've been a little too conversational with Nellie because I feel like I didn't want to have that commandantic voice. That's a new adjective in the vocabulary.
Not a word, but should be.
Yeah, right. But she hasn't been responding to it. And I think because she lives in a family of talkers, that's the kind of inflection that we all use. So she doesn't really think that it applies to her. So when I really get very curt with my command, she knows I'm talking to her about it. And honestly, that is the resolution that I just need to develop the first time I say something to her.
I hunted with a guy one time that trained his dog in German. That way the dog would always know when you were using words for the dog. Is that a thing?
Was it a German Shepherd?
Yep. No, it was a German Shorthair.
This is just a small aside, but when I was a kid in North Missouri, we didn't have a lot of neighbors. It's a pretty rural area, but probably 2 miles down the road, there was a guy who had a German Shepherd. When I got to learn how to ride a bike when I was probably 6 or 7, maybe 5, I can't remember how old I was, it was way more pleasurable to ride my bike down the blacktop than it was on the potholy big rubble gravel road of our farm. And I was always kind of aware of this big German Shepherd that lived down the road a little bit, but I had never really gotten up close and personal with it till the first time I rode my bike by it. And I saw out of the corner of my eye this gigantic dog bounding down the driveway toward the highway where I was riding my bike. And it was the first time I ever heard the neighbor call his dog. And I'm pretty sure it was calling the dog back instead of calling the dog onto me, but the dog's name was Hitler.
Oh, jeez.
Jeez.
9.
Oh my gosh. All right, bring us home, Mr. McKean.
Whoa.
Well, I think that might have... Okay.
So, no, it just... So I have this vision of Neville Chamberlain saying, Hitler, go home.
It's... Take care of yourself. The Sudetenland is yours.
Mm-hmm. We don't mind Poland. Okay. All right, now you can bring us home. Now that I've gotten my historical reference in.
Thank you. We weren't quite done anyway. Well, I wish we had a little bit more porous membrane between our gabbing, talking, and effusing and that of our reader or listener. You can tell I'm a print man. Because what I want to say is we want to hear your resolutions, but it's just there's not an easy way to facilitate that dialogue, that exchange. But find a way, give us your resolution. Maybe give us a place where we can all meet up this fall with our Rainbow Coalition of Labrador Retrievers. Until then, welcome to the new year. I hope it's healthy, happy, and productive for you. And from all of us, keep it on gravel.